Hey everybody, and welcome to the D&D podcast. Today, I want to give you all my history with the game, so you all know generally what I've been through and what I've done in relation to D&D. I was first invited to a game in high school. There was a group of people I sort of knew. We weren't exactly friends at the time, though we sort of became friends. And they asked if I wanted to join. I said yes. And they told me just to come over to their place on Saturday. So I did. Brought character sheets and dice. And that was my first session 0 with character creation. It was pretty fun with about 11 other people. At the time, we didn't really know because, well, we were all brand new to D&D. This was everyone's first game. So we didn't know at the time that that was an outrageously high number of people to play D&D with. Though for the game we did play, it was needed. Because next session, we begun the Tomb of Annihilation. What an introductory to D&D. It was a very hard game. Probably the hardest I have ever played. Well, at least as a player, not so much as a DM. And I loved it. I made my first character who I fell in love with. All these other people that we were playing with, I grew to like them and they became good friends. I still keep in contact with a few. And that was my first experience, although that was still the session with probably the worst DM I ever had. Though about halfway through the game, there was a guy that kind of was showing me the ropes overall because he knew people who had played it. He had a little bit of experience while the rest of us were completely new. He kind of helped me understand some things a little bit better. And he, about halfway through the tomb, he wanted to run a one-shot with about maybe a fourth of the people. And he asked if I wanted to be a part of it. I said, yeah, I would love to. So we had our first one-shot. It was Curse of Strahd-esque. It was a similar setting to Bavaria, but only less dark. It was still very dark, very spooky and creepy, but it's not like it stayed that way all the time. And it was a very fun one-shot. That was actually the first time I played a class that wasn't just a fighter, it was a barbarian, but a class that just wasn't a tank. It was actually my first spellcaster when I was a druid. My first time playing a druid, I fell in love with the spell Erupting Earth. So almost every time I have been a spellcaster, I have been a druid. Although I have wanted to give that new artificer a try. And I have played a paladin once, but I'll get to that. After the one shot, we resumed the normal campaign. But again, another couple sessions in, the same guy, he got the book Curse of Strahd as a gift. So he said, how about we alternate weeks? This week we'll play Tomb, next week we'll play Curse. So that's what we did for a while. I was a part of both campaigns. Curse of Strahd only had about the DM and 5 other people. And I really enjoyed Curse of Strahd. It didn't last very long because the DM had some personal issues come up that I won't go into. And he was unable to continue DMing for a while. Unfortunately, we just never picked it back up, and time just passed and we eventually forgot about it. And we focused more on the Tomb of Annihilation, which I absolutely loved. A couple more, actually several sessions later, there was another player who bought a book, Watergate Dragon Heist. It was brand new at the time, I think. It may have been brand new. I will have to look that up. And he said it was pretty cool. He read it through and he would love to try it. Only because he had a bit of a reputation, only about 3 people agreed to be in that campaign. But it turns out he was a great DM. A lot of people criticized his. We had only seen him as a player before, but he was actually a great DM. And I enjoyed Watergate Dragon Heist. And unfortunately, we were unable to finish Watergate Dragon Heist because college came around and we all went our separate ways. We just never got back together to finish it. And now, just way too much time has passed, and I don't even remember where we were. Though I do remember a lot of key events. I remember I was a druid again, because I really enjoyed being it in a one-shot, so I wanted to try it in a full campaign. Ironically, the only campaign I finished as a player was a homebrew campaign that came later, and the Tomb of Annihilation. Though the Tomb of Annihilation was very tough and very tricky, at the very end of it there were only 2 characters left alive, and it was me and the monk of the group, who the DM, I think the DM had a lot of personal preference towards the monk, because he gave him massive upgrades, while the rest of us just got nothing. I remember he gave him a suit of armor just because, like, about 3/4 of the way through the game. And it was specifically made for him. And what it did was it made his monks what they do. They are known for punching. Basically, they turned his punches from 1d6 to 5d6 each. And he just became extremely overpowered and a legend in the group. Anyway, but at the very end, it was just my character and his character, and because of him, we were able to defeat Asirak, who's at the end of Tomb of Annihilation. That's not really a spoiler, it's what the entire game is building towards. Anyway, after that, we all went our separate ways for a while, and I actually begun my own campaign it was right after we just stopped doing Watergate Dragon Heist. Because we did play a couple sessions of that, but then the DM, he decided to stop reading ahead, so he was never really prepared for sessions. So I volunteered my campaign. I have been working on it ever since Curse of Strahd came around. So it was several months I had been working on it, and I was very proud of it. Though at the time I did make it as if everyone from Tomb of Annihilation would be in that campaign, and initially, all but 2 of them were. For the first session, all but 2 of my original group were in it, and I said, okay, it's going to be a high-level campaign by the end. 10 people versus this guy, that should be a pretty fair match. I have talked about Silverwood in previous videos, but just a quick recap, he is the most powerful enemy I have ever created. Extremely powerful, can kill practically anyone and anything. He's very legendary. Blew up half of a continent in 5 days. He was a lunatic and very powerful. Anyway, I figured 10 people at around level 20 should be able to defeat him. Like I said, very high level campaign. But they would have to earn their way up to 20. I didn't just start them there. Unfortunately, after the first session, people really wanted to finish Tomb of Annihilation, and they wanted to finish Waterdeep Dragon Heist. They just started saying, we don't need anything else new to think about, which I understood. Though after we stopped doing Waterdeep, less and less people were actually coming to mine, and eventually it got to the point where I only had 2 members of the original group, and one of which was the DM for Waterdeep Dragon Heist. The other was also a player in that game. So I had to find a new group to finish this with. I was actually able to get some really good friends to try out D&D who have barely been able to stop playing since. I'm really glad I introduced them to it though, because they really do seem to love it, and I've been playing with that second group ever since. And it's only been growing too. Actually, we recently added one more member to it, and it was a really great addition. And after my first campaign, I was actually kind of proud, because I had DM'd my first entire campaign. I had DM'd a one-shot previously, before my first session, just to give everyone a feel for how I would be DMing. And I loved that one-shot. I've run it about 4 other times. Anyway, so that after I finished my first campaign, I was a little nervous because, when my entire first group left, I had some thoughts in my head, well, maybe they just hated the campaign, maybe it was garbage. But immediately after we finished, the entire group was saying, well, when's the next one? We really liked this. This was great, when's the next one? Stupidly, I said, next week. I regret saying that to this day, because it took me many months to plan my first one, and I had about a week to plan at least a second one, or at least a first session to a second one. But in order to buy myself more time, I just made the 1 week session 0, and I had a general idea of what I wanted to do. So I just had to expand upon that, make it bigger. We were using the same location, so some stuff would be easy. And overall, I pulled it off pretty well, because I had to, like I said, I was reusing the same locations. Some people would be just slightly older because there's a small time jump. And I would just have some new problems, new side events, new side quests, etc. It overall wasn't too big of a problem to put together. And it turned out alright. It wasn't nearly as good as the first one, but granted, I didn't have nearly as much time to work on it. The next game I was in was also homebrew, but I was actually a player. I can't remember what I played as for the life of me, but it was one of my friends who I brought in for my first homebrew campaign. He wanted to try out DMing, so we played in his campaign. I personally enjoyed it. I thought it was really good. But overall, I'd say I enjoyed it overall. But after that was over, then I had a third campaign. I probably shouldn't say that I ran a third campaign, but in reality, I just had a third concept. At the time, I was going through some stuff, and consequently, I was being pretty lazy. Well, at least when it came to playing D&D. We had a date to start, and I had found the D20 Modern Conversion rules, which I tried out once in a one-shot previously around the time of Waterdeep Dragon Heist. I apologize for going back and putting stuff in, but sometimes I just forget stuff I've been in until it's relevant. And so I had been a player in a modern day one-shot once, and I surprisingly loved it. It was really fun, really amazing. The DM had really thoughtful and placements and ideas. So I thought I would like to take that but make it an entire campaign. Since no one else was too familiar with the rules, I would be the DM. But I didn't make anything for it. Literally nothing. The day of the campaign, I just came in, I sat down, I waited for everyone else to get there. I sent them all the rules, and they were making characters. And while they were doing that, I was just kind of staring blankly for a while. And then it just hits me all of a sudden. I have absolutely nothing for these people. I've got nothing to give to them. I have absolutely nothing planned. So, I had to BS the entire third campaign. I just was anything that came to my mind. I'm like, well, hey, this could happen. We're starting here. And believe it or not, I have a knack for improvisation, or at least when it comes to the fantasy world. And none of them could tell that I was BSing the whole thing. At the very end, they thought I had everything planned from the beginning, and I was very proud of that. And I will always remember that time, not for really any of the experiences we had playing, not for the time that wild magic turned my final boss's bones to ice, but the fact that I was able to BS an entire campaign and have absolutely no one notice. And it's not like after the first couple of sessions, I would go home and research a little bit. Absolutely, every time I showed up, I had absolutely nothing planned. I would always feel terrible, and then I would BS the entire thing, and no one would even notice. It felt pretty good when I wasn't feeling like garbage for not planning something for them. But for those who say you can't BS everything, I am living proof that you can. Although I definitely can't recommend it. It wasn't as good. It was actually better than the second campaign, somehow, but it wasn't better than the first. So planning is always good. Highly recommend doing that, but it is possible to BS an entire campaign. After the third campaign, we took a little break. I went off to college. I found a new group and reran my first campaign. They are actually still in it. It's been a long time, but we just rarely ever had the opportunity to meet up. But yeah, we kept in contact, and they are still in the middle of that campaign. Eventually, I met back up with my original group, and we played Watergate Dragon Heist. I had gotten the book as a gift, and I remembered all the good times I had playing it. So I actually DM'd it this time, and it was just as fun. And I'm really glad I did. Around that time, my college roommate invited me to play Pathfinder 2.0, or not Pathfinder 2.0, Pathfinder 2E, because his friend was testing out a concept he had. So I agreed. I had never played Pathfinder before. I loved it. It was amazing. I have absolutely nothing bad to say about it. I really enjoyed it, and I really liked it. After that, well, actually before that, my roommate taught me Magic the Gathering. He taught me a lot of stuff besides D&D. And actually later that year, I tried Call of Cthulhu for the first time. Ironically, not with him. It was with my original group again, minus a couple people, because one guy had to work and one guy couldn't make it. But Call of Cthulhu was very interesting. It was a pretty big difference from the normal 20-sided dice rolling that I was used to. Because I had to, work with percentages. I had to look with how big of a success things were, and it was just a different. It was something I had to get used to. And I'm not saying I didn't like it, because I definitely did. I loved the horror element to it. I just wasn't used to it, and I'm still not exactly used to it. But after I play it again, I'm sure I'll be a lot more used to it, and once I get to that, I will like it a lot more. Although I do definitely like it. It is a very fun game. I love being in the 1920s ish with the couple of investigators. It's really fun. But besides that, 3.5, I did try it and I loved it, though I never found a group that was playing it again after that initial time. But I did love 3.5, though most of my experience is with 5e. And that's about all I've done so far. I don't believe I'm leaving anything out. I'm sure I'll think of something the second I stop recording. But that's the overall history of my experience with not just D&D, but tabletop role-playing games in general. I hope this gives some background information for what I do know and the stuff I don't. If you've enjoyed this video, give me a like, comment, subscribe. Let me know if there's anything I can be doing better, anything you want me to talk about. And until next time, roll well.